If you are watching this video, I would like to give you a warning. It is very graphic in terms of sexual content. If that is offensive to you, either A, don't watch the video, or B, be sure that you watch this video with headphones on or in a space where your children or others are not going to be exposed. Just wanted you to know. For those of you who are Christians, let me tell you something about this video. As a Christian mom, I felt a great need to explain to my children about their sexuality in a moral, biblical context. This is what God says, and He's the one who gets to set the parameters. Any kind of sexual activity outside of a covenant relationship of marriage is sin. Since He's the one who designed life and He designed my body and yours, He actually has a right to say that. As a Christian parent, I don't want you to be upset with me that I'm not putting every scriptural context of sexuality into this video, but I do want you to know foundationally where I'm coming from. Do you know that in Hebrews 13, God said that marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled? I taught my sons since they were very little boys that human sexuality was a great gift from God, intended to come to its fullest fruition in the context of marriage, where people who love one another and are committed to one another for the rest of their lives and have made promises to God and each other can then enjoy the pleasure and the responsibility of a sexual union. And it is only part of the union which includes union of heart and spirit and mind. I really want you to know that it is up to you how you develop and train your child in his or her sexuality. But as a Christian parent, if you are not discussing sex with your kids, somebody is. And they are getting hundreds, if not thousands, of sexual messages every single day by TV, on the internet, on billboards, all over the place. The way people dress in Walmart, they are getting the message. What message are they getting from you? So if you really teach them that God designed human sexuality and quit letting someone else, including our enemy and our children's enemy, have a hold of all that power and take back that power yourself and teach your child about sex and their own sexuality in the context of a moral marital framework, then I believe that will really help you to be a far more successful parent. I'm glad to have you with me today on Paint a Beautiful Picture. We're going to talk about teaching and training your child. Again, I'm going to review with you that what you do not have, you cannot give. So if there are things that you need to learn in order to teach your child more effectively, then get on the ball. Start watching YouTube videos more, start reading books, do what you have to do so that you're going to be capable of teaching your child the things that you want them to know. Let me ask you a question. How comfortable are you talking about sex? Yes, that's what I just asked you. How comfortable are you talking about sex? Of course, because I'm a nurse and I deal with people when they're having babies, sexuality is a topic it's not very difficult for me to talk about. But even when my kids were little boys, it just wasn't that difficult for me to talk about. I can't say why. Probably because people in my family would talk about it occasionally. I have 7 older brothers and sisters. I heard stuff. But even my mom and her sisters would talk about it when they probably didn't think we were listening. It wasn't as taboo as it might have been in some people's families. But I will tell you that I've done a ton of counseling. And people whose parents are awkward about it or don't talk about it at all, they have a lot of difficulty. And I always say to them, you have to get more comfortable with this. Because if you don't talk to your kids about sex, somebody will. And who is that going to be? So if you are a person with morals, and you are a person with strong beliefs and a person with principles, but you never talk to your child about sex, someone without morals and without strong beliefs and without principles probably will. That would be a disaster. So let's start here. If you are married, or frankly, if you live together and you've been together long enough to have a child together, you've definitely had sex, and yet you can't talk about it. If you eat a good meal, you say, wow, this chocolate cake is amazing. Well, do better. Tell me more. Mmm, the texture is really wonderful. It's really soft and crumbly, and the chocolate is perfectly blended. And okay, we're getting better. Don't say to me, yeah, okay, uh, we have sex. Yeah, that's not enough. And let me tell you, kids are infinitely curious about sex. In fact, let me really give this to you straight. Do you know the first words that were ever spoken about you? Those words were sexual. Whether it was on the day you were born and someone looked at your genitalia and said, "Oh, it's a girl," or "It's a boy." Yeah, the first words spoken about you. And even today with ultrasounds, do you want to know if you're going to have a girl or a boy? Really, let's be serious. A lot of our sexuality defines us, and even in our own mind, much less in the minds of others, describes us. I mean, why do you think when a guy talks about a really attractive woman, you go, huh? And we all get it. So many things in our world have a sexual connotation that is impure or immoral or, God help us all, flat out inappropriate. That it isn't very surprising that we don't know how to talk about it in a calm way. We don't know how to bring it to our children in a way that satisfies their curiosity and tells them what they need to know and makes them aware that your body isn't dirty or there isn't something wrong with you because you have these thoughts or questions, or especially when they get to be teenagers or young adults, there's something really wrong with sex. Well, if there is, then why is that all I ever see on television and in movies and people talk about it and it's in books? And I mean, what's the deal anyway? Doesn't even make sense. Okay, so here's what I say. If you would say to your child, this is your arm, which I think most of you wouldn't call it a doodad or I don't know, whatever weird thing people call things. Why can you not say to your son, that is your penis? Or say to your daughter, that is your vulva on the outside, and that's your vagina on the inside. Why are those words so very hard to say? Most likely because your parents couldn't say them, and your parents didn't talk to you about things in relationship to your sexuality. What a tragedy. I mean, what a missed opportunity. So, when you can talk about those without being embarrassed and without being weird, then your child finds out that, you know what, human sexuality is a normal thing. My mom and dad can talk about this. I can talk about this with them. I could, it's really perfectly okay. All right, so the first time my son asked me, one of my sons, he was about just not quite 2 years old. He said, Mom, you want to tell me how babies get made? I said, sure. So we had birds, so he knew what an egg was. And we planted in the garden, so he knew what a seed was. So I said, a dad has a seed and a mom has an egg, and they come together and they make a new unit, and that is a baby. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, just as easy as that. He was little and he understood. When he was about 4, he came and he said, Mom, how in the world did that seed get to that egg? Ah, now we're moving on. And I understood that my son's mind and his curiosity was starting to get bigger. And so I said to him, I said, well, a man has seeds that grow inside of his body in his testicles. And so he's like, well, I have testicles. I bet I have seeds. And I said, actually, no, you don't. You do not. I said, what's really interesting, girls, they have those eggs from the time they're inside of their mom. Well, that's not very fair. I said, yeah, I know. Remember, life isn't fair. But girls have those eggs in their body when they're inside of their mama. Isn't that cool? He's like, wow. I said, yeah, it really is cool. All right, so those eggs are inside of a woman's body in a special place that holds on to them called ovaries. They're not all ready yet. Some of them are ripe and some of them aren't. When they get ripe, they jump out of the ovary and the end of the fallopian tube grabs onto them and pulls them and brings them into that uterus. You remember that special place where babies grow up? He'd heard this many times because we had lots of friends that were pregnant. You know, that special place where babies grow up? The egg starts coming toward the uterus and the seed goes to the egg and they get together. Now, being a very smart child, he said, yeah, how does that seed get in there? And I said, okay, so your penis, it can get harder. And so the dad, his penis goes into the mom's vagina, and that seed jumps out of there and connects with the egg, and you make a baby. Wow, that's pretty cool. Good to go, right? And because he had heard these words his whole life and they weren't weird words, and I was really comfortable with it, and we just talked about it, and I drew him a couple pictures, he knew all about it. Now, I had a friend that was a prude. I just don't know another word for it. I mean it. And I said, do not tell, and I listed the names of his friends, anything about this because their mom wouldn't like it. And he said, Mom, Aunt, because even though she was my friend, he called her by name. He said, Aunt, wouldn't want me to talk about this? What's wrong with this? I mean, this is the way God makes a baby. I said, I know, son, but some people don't talk about it with their kids, and that's their decision, and you have to respect that. I say that to you because if you talk honestly with your child, and they're pretty familiar with terms, and they'll say something to their friend about their penis or whatever, the parents might not be as calm as you wish. And I definitely heard about it a few times from a couple friends of mine, like, I can't believe you taught your kid to say penis or vagina or uterus. And I would say to them, this is long before I was a nurse, I can't believe you taught your kid to say arm, leg, shoulder. I mean, come on. It's a body part, and that's what it's called. Why would I say something differently? Okay, so I will tell you the funny side of this. One day, my sons and I are in Red Food Store in East Ridge, Tennessee, and they were fighting over a bag of peanuts. And so my one son said, you need to let go of my peanuts. And he kept yelling it at my other son because he wouldn't let go. And this older lady, a white-haired older lady, she comes walking around the corner with this look of consternation on her face. And my son turns around and looks at her. He goes, don't worry. I said peanuts. I did not say penis. Oh, yes. God bless my son. This is a true story, ladies and gentlemen. Anyways, sometimes you might be embarrassed. This is normal stuff. Let me throw in a thing for you here. Never deal with your kids because you're embarrassed. That's on you, not on them. You know, your kids are going to embarrass you their whole life long. That sometimes happens. You do not yell at a kid or freak out on a kid because they embarrassed you. Get over it. People embarrass each other sometimes. Your kids will definitely embarrass you. All right, so tell them the proper words, answer their question. Okay, I'm going to tell you, don't listen to this video with a child in the room. I probably should say that at the beginning, so I'll throw that in for you. But definitely don't listen to this part. All right, so my son was 7 years old. He came home, and we had a piece of paper in those days where you had to grant permission for a child to take sex ed at school. And emphatically, I wrote a letter and I refused to sign it. And I put on there, my son is being taught sexual education at home. He may not have the class. Okay, so he comes home one day and he says to me, Mom, do you know how men have sex together? I said, yeah, of course I do, but go ahead, tell me what you know. And he said, one man puts his penis in the other guy's anus. That's got to hurt. I said, yeah, I can tell you, because by then I was a nurse. I said, it can cause severe injury and a lot of trouble. You're right. But how do you know this? Where'd you learn about this? And he said, oh, in sex ed class today. I promise you, in 5 minutes or less, We were standing in Mr. Robert Lehman's principal's office, and I said, "So, Bob, uh, my son has something to tell you." And because my son was used to talking about sexual things with me, he told Mr. Lehman what he told me. I said, "So get into my son's file." And he goes, "I don't have to, Violet. I already know he's not supposed to be in that class." I said, "Oh, yes. And this is going to get dealt with." And it did. That teacher definitely got reprimanded. But you know what? I would have never known if I hadn't talked to my kids about sexual things what my son was getting told at school, because he would have been far too afraid or ashamed to come home and tell me. A child has no reason to be ashamed of their body, and they shouldn't be afraid to talk to you. And that's up to you. How comfortable you are talking about sexual things with anyone is going to affect your ability to teach and train your child about their own sexuality. Let me advance far into the future. When my kids were teenagers and they were going through some things, they always came and talked to me, and they knew that they could. When my one son's friends started being sexually active and some of them had STDs and other things, he would say, I think you should come to my house and talk to my mom. And by the dozens, they did. Your kids got to talk to somebody. I'd really like to believe that it would be you. If you would teach them and train them that their sexuality has a context, and believe you, for me, it's a moral context within the confines of marriage. And on a Saturday session, we'll be talking about that. I'm not trying to impose my morals on you. I'm trying to help you be an effective parent. And that means that you need to be able to talk to your child about sex. If you're not there yet, then you need to have somebody in your world that you can. If that's your spouse, if that's your significant other, if that's your best friend, whomever, find somebody somewhere that you can have an open and honest conversation about sexual things and your own body, and start to develop a comfort level of discussing that in order that you can teach and train your child about their own body and what healthy sexuality really means. This part of parenting definitely takes real courage. And so I will encourage you today to grow and develop in your comfort level with your own body, with your own sexuality, in order that you might teach and train your child to be unashamed of their sexuality as well. Thank you for joining me. You may find additional information on our paintabeautifulpicture.com website. Additionally, you may watch me on Rumble, and you may also listen to a podcast on Buzzsprout or Spreaker, all under the name Paint a Beautiful Picture. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. You may subscribe, and if you are interested in receiving notifications, please hit the notifications button.